Hey, welcome to the show. I am so excited. Today's show is going to be a perfect illustration of some of the curveballs that life will throw at you, and also some of the interesting ways that our lives' paths intersect. I want to introduce my guest to you. Her name is Audrey Rindlisbacher. And Audrey, I don't feel like I can introduce you without first noting that you and I first crossed paths almost 40 years ago when I was a missionary in Oklahoma, and you were a young woman growing up there. And then about
Oh,
20
I
years
love it.
later, we
Yep.
crossed paths again in southern Utah. And um, I'm so thrilled to have you on the program today to talk about your book that you've written, Seven Laws of, actually, that's not the correct name, but is it Seven Laws of Life Mission? I want to make
The
sure I get
title
this
is
right.
just The Mission-Driven Life.
Gotcha.
The
So
subtitle is Discover and Fulfill Your Unique Contribution to the World.
tell first of all, let's give a little bit of background on
Okay.
who you are, just so people
Okay.
understand. We had a whole conversation before we went on the air here
hmm
to just kind of catching up on, hey, what are your
hmm
kids doing and what are you doing? And
Right.
safe to say, life has thrown a few curveballs at you, but
Yeah.
the essence of who you are. Talk to me about that for a minute.
Oh, wow. I don't, that's a huge question. I'm a wife of 31 years, I guess it is, and a mother of six. They came boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, so that was pretty great. And most grown. My youngest is going to be a senior this year, so most of them are out of the house and living the dream. And I had all of my own troubles and issues for years and years and tried a lot of methods, including, courses, therapy, and I couldn't find good answers. And so I had read the book The Hiding Place. Have you ever heard of that book? Oh, yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah,
love Corey
so
Ten Boom.
yes, yes, life changer for me, game changer for me. If anyone has not read that, go read The Hiding Place. They harbored over 800 Jews in their home during World War II, but I wanted to be like the Ten Booms. I wanted a Ten Boom family, and I just thought I could never get there. They're so perfect. They're so amazing. They're so incredible. And then later, I happened upon a bunch of Corey's other books. And I don't know if you know this, but there's several other books, and in those books, she talks about their lives before The Hiding Place. And so once I started reading those books, I was like, oh, wait a minute. They weren't always a finished product. Their lives weren't always perfect. They had problems like I have. So what can I learn from them? And that just sent me on a path for several years of studying all the men and women that I knew had had a really positive impact on the world. And I wanted to discover, how did they become those kinds of people? People like Ben Carson or Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi or Dorothea Dix or Clara Barton. Some of them are up on my wall here, Martin Luther King Jr. or C.S. Lewis or, whoever. And so these were my heroes, and I wanted to know how they became the great men and women they became. And eventually I saw this pattern of these seven laws that they all lived kind of in kind of an order. And there were undergirding principles for each of those laws. And so eventually I decided I wanted to write about that, to give that out to other people because that pattern gave clarity and a path forward for me. And in the meantime, I discovered that many other women had the same pain and the same struggles that I'd had, and I wanted to help them. So, in conjunction with the book, I launched a program for moms called The Mission Driven Mom. The book is called The Mission Driven Life. It's just for anyone. But what I did was I wanted to demonstrate the laws through story. I wanted to make it really readable, really quick and easy to get through. And so I used the 10 booms. So there's many people in that family who all had very different, unique life missions, but also they executed some life missions together because we all have more than one mission, one call from God, more than one project to do while we're here. And so I was able to get permission to quote them as extensively as I wanted and use as many pictures as I wanted from their lives. And so that's how the book came to be.
I love it. And I have to confess this. Hopefully, this is wisdom kicking in as I get older. But more and more, when I hear anyone, whatever age they are, talk about feeling a call or a
Yeah.
sense of mission in their life,
Yes.
my ears perk up because that has become the driving force in my own life. And
Yeah.
and I want to be on mission, not because that's how I build the biggest, monument to myself, but because I feel like when I acknowledge that, I'm acknowledging that not only does God exist, but knows my name and actually
Yes.
has expectations for me,
Yes.
which he will help me accomplish if I will
Yes.
humble myself and let him. And that shift in thinking has changed my perspective on so much. Um, where do we begin talking about the laws that pertain to a life mission?
Well, the first thing I would probably say is that the word mission is intentionally chosen for the reason that you're talking about at the beginning of the book. And by the way, whoever hears this and would like to read the book, the audio book is free at themissiondrivenmom.com. So just go over there and get the audio book and you can listen to it. You can buy a hard copy if you want. Because we want this message out. So anyway, it's intentionally chosen. If you look up the definition of purpose versus mission, what you find is that purpose, the definition of purpose is something you assign to yourself, and mission is a call from an authority who endows you with power to fulfill that mission. It's just like Mission Impossible, right? Like, hey, Ethan, we're going to give you this thing to do. And, you know, you have the authority and the tools and the resources behind you in order to accomplish that particular work. Of course, being a parent is a call. Being a spouse is a call. You know, those are calls that we have. Your career may very well be a call for you, but you also have been divinely designed and endowed with certain very unique gifts and talents. And you have a responsibility to uncover and develop those and to use those in God's service to contribute in your home and in your community to make the world a better place. And God wants that for you. He's going to partner with you in that process. He's going to help you to walk that path. So just like you were talking about, Bryan, the first law is, of course, to love God. The first four laws we call foundational laws, and they're all about love. Mother Teresa taught us that our mission is to convey God's love. So that's our primary mission in life, is to love God and convey that love. And so loving God means establishing your divine center. That means that you are grounded, you draw your worth from God, you know who you are, you know that you matter, that your worth is infinite regardless of your choices and behavior. You're never unlovable, and that you have a responsibility to develop a relationship with God and to let his will rule in your life. That's tough. That's the challenge, but that's what helps us move forward.
Okay,
Go
I
ahead.
have to ask this, even
Yeah.
though I know most people are going to know the answer. But so when I do that, that means my life is going to become smooth sailing from that point forward, right?
No,
I'm never
no,
going to have troubles again as long as
no,
I do. No.
no.
Oh, what bad stuff can still happen? Trials, challenges?
Yep. Yep.
Say
Yep.
it isn't so.
I know. One of the ways that we've structured the laws to make them more understandable, there's four foundational laws: loving God, loving yourself, loving truth, and loving humanity. And loving yourself means striving for self-mastery. There's some very unique principles around what it means to truly love ourselves. There's a lot of crap out there about self-care and self-love that's like doing your nails or a ski trip with your girlfriends. Those aren't bad things, but that's not loving yourself. Loving yourself is disciplining yourself, meeting your real needs, and developing your gifts and talents. So then we love truth. That means to build our lives on a center of principles. We learn to understand what principles are, how principles are God's laws for running this human machine, as C.S. Lewis says it, and we become acquainted with how to live in a principle-centered manner. And then loving humanity means learning about the people around us, learning about their religious beliefs, learning about different, nations, histories, peoples, cultures, races, and becoming a servant leader to those individuals. Being able to love them where they are, meet them where they are, and bring principled solutions to their problems. And then the last three laws we call the leadership laws. This is when you're asked by God and the world and sometimes the people around you to step outside yourself, take some risks, hear a call. You're prepared at this point to hear God's call, and it's risky. You have to hear that, prepare yourself to hear that call, answer the call, and then do it again. Those are the last three laws.
Oh my goodness. And I say this with almost a sense of awe, but as you're describing that, I can think of every one of those applying in my own life. And that's not to
Yes.
say, so therefore I've done the cycle and it's all done, because
No.
you said you do it again. How long
Yes.
does this cycle continue?
It's all your life. And one of the things I talk about in the book often, I'll remind the reader, like, you're going to return to the foundation laws over and over again. You're going to drive deeper into your love of God, deeper into your love of yourself, deeper into your love of humanity. You're going to hit walls of problems that you don't know how to solve. So you return to those foundational laws, you strengthen yourself, and then you go answer a new call. And that just makes you stronger for the journey, and your impact grows. It's like the Covey circle of concern and circle of influence. As you work on the places where you genuinely have influence, starting with yourself, you have influence over yourself first. And so as you strengthen your influence over yourself, as you strive for self-mastery, your ability to have influence for that to radiate outside of you. And this is what we find. I have on my podcast a whole bunch of mission-driven stories that people can go listen to with these individuals who I've named and many others who lived these laws. I demonstrate how they lived these laws and how it helped them to have greater and greater impact. There are so many calls that the Ten Boom family answered way before they harbored Jews. They had Corey had a little group for mentally ill people that met in her home, and she took care of them. She had a girls' club that became international, and she was traveling around the world helping her girls' club groups. They had many foster children in their home. Father spoke internationally. He also helped bring Jewish children over to Holland before World War II from other watchmakers. He had his own magazine, Watchmakers Magazine. You know, the son, Willem, was given an internship to go to Germany in the 30s and to study Hebrew so that he could be an apologist to the Jewish people. And he saw all of the trouble in Germany then. I mean, the Ten Booms knew about the trouble 10 years before it even began to happen, and on and on and on. There's just layers and layers of beautiful actions. You know, when what I thought of when you said, do we have problems once we hear the call? There's this beautiful story in the hearing the call or the executing the call. I can't remember which chapter it's in, maybe both, where I talk about Willem the son, and his he became a pastor. I mean, he had just sacrificed so much and worked so hard to become a pastor. In the first area where he was a pastor, it was a grind. The people were awful to him, and he just about lost his faith. He was ready to walk away from Christianity altogether. And he tried to lean into scripture. And for 2 or 3 years, he fought that spiritual battle. He went back to his roots. He went back to scripture. He worked with his father, and he came out of it stronger, a better man, more capable and able to serve. But yeah, it reminds me a lot of in John. I think it's John 15, where Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches, and all those that come to me I'll prune them so they can bring forth more fruit. When you really turn your life over to God, get ready for a great adventure, and it will be thrilling and joyful, and it will be really tough. But what else? What? You really want to be a couch potato? Like, do you really want to miss the adventure? Like, do you really want to, because there's pain. There's pain involved with every good thing. Every good thing is hard. So we shouldn't run away from hard. We should run toward the adventure of a lifetime, of the discovery of the missions God has for us, because that's where the real meaning and depth of why I get up in the morning and why I do what I do is because God's called me and I've got to answer the call.
Yeah, life is much better when you don't try to skip the challenging parts.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on something here. I'd like to get your perspective
Yeah.
on when it comes to hearing that call. Now, we're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about a one-time call or a
Sure.
one-time process.
Yeah.
I'd like to know about your experience in terms of when a person hears that call and responds quickly.
Uh-huh.
Is it conditioning them to be better attuned to hearing it when the
Yes.
next call comes?
Yes. Yes. And I had this really interesting conversation recently. So there's someone in my family who I love. I don't know if I'm supposed to say who they are, but someone in my family who we were recently at a family event. And she said to me, Audrey, what do you do if you know God's calling you and you don't want to do it? And I said, well, first of all, I would make sure, have you really checked in with him? Are you really sure that he's asking you to do this? And she said, oh yeah. She said, it's been in the back of my mind for years. And now coming into this year, he's made it very clear that I shouldn't waste any more time and that he really wants me to move forward. And I said, well, if you are hearing a call and you don't want to do it and you're wanting to just scrap it because she's like, it just every single thing about it sounds hard and painful and difficult and scary. Everything. There's not anything redeeming or pleasant about this call for her right now. And I said, well, then the next thing I would do is ask myself, why am I avoiding the call? Why am I scared to do it? what is actually going on. And I would maybe journal about that and get really honest with myself about why I'm avoiding this call. And if it's for reasons that aren't noble, reasons that aren't Christ-like. And she starts shaking her head. Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's total selfishness that I don't want to do this. Like, she's like, I'm not lying to myself. I know why I don't want to do this. And I said, well, then I would turn to God again and ask him to help me with those roadblocks. Help me to want to do it. Help me to see the maybe the good that could potentially come to me and those I love in it, to strengthen me up, increase my faith, increase my desire. He'll help change our hearts if we'll let him. Like, he's can do anything. He just needs our he just needs us to ask. He just needs our willingness to turn to him in that way. And bless her, she is doing it. You know, she is it's being a foster parent. And she's got 5 little ones at home, and the youngest is still little, and she's scared to death to do this for a myriad of reasons that I'm sure you can imagine, but she's doing the training and she's trying to step out in faith. And that's what hearing the call requires. You know, it requires us to step out in faith, to take a step into the dark. But we can trust that our God is there. You know, he'll prove himself in the small ways and in the big ways. And then you have more courage for the next call because you know he was there for you last time.
I love how you put that in the small ways, because if someone were to ask me what are the things, what have been the real pivot points in your life where you know the hinge points where you found the direction that you were supposed to go, and it was in the small details. It wasn't a
Yeah.
big, you know, I didn't see a burning bush while I was out walking around one day. It was usually the little details.
Yeah.
But it took courage, and I think that's just part of the process. Talk to me a little bit about how self mastery actually helps us to strengthen our relationship with God, as well as to figure out who we are in terms of what does God expect of me.
Yeah. So, one of the key ways that this happens is that we have real needs. And we are the only ones that can meet those needs for ourselves. We have mental needs, we have emotional needs, we have spiritual needs, physical needs, social needs. And my spouse can't meet my needs. My spouse can't fill me up with testimony. My spouse can't get me in shape. My spouse can't put that nutritious food into my belly. My spouse can't build a friendship with someone. Only I can do that for myself. And loving yourself, love is an action. The feelings of love follow the actions of love. And so that is why we can love ourselves even when we don't really like ourselves or we don't feel that love toward ourselves. We can make a choice. We can decide to take a loving action, and then we will approve of ourselves. Our own internal approbation will be the result of any small action that nurtures us in a meaningful way. I choose something healthy instead of that brownie, or I make sure that I get enough sleep, or I say I'm sorry to someone I've hurt. Every time I do that, I am more at peace with myself. And of course, I need God's help, especially if I don't have the strength to do that small thing, but I know I need to. See, the overarching concept, and I talk about this briefly in the book, is the law of nature, or the natural law. This is a concept that's been lost in the modern day, but I've been studying it and teaching it for 20 years. And what this says is that God made this world with certain immutable laws. The way that Cecil B. DeMille said it is that we can't break the law, we can only break ourselves against the law. So when we have trouble in any area of our life, it's because we're out of line with those natural laws, those true principles that are meant to make us healthy and whole. And what we're meant to do is to butt up against life and to feel the pain. And that's the signal that it's time to go look for something that we need to do better. And as we engage in that process, it's this beautiful cyclical experience, because like in the academy, the first level of the academy, there's 3 levels, then you graduate and there's a Clapham team. It's this beautiful cadence for women. But the first level is the first 2 laws, love of God and self, because those relationships are the foundation of all your relationships. And they're so intimately linked because I wrote in my Bible one time, on the very first page of my Bible, I asked the question, can I ever actually really know myself if I don't know the God who knows me better than I know myself?
Ooh, yeah.
I've got to take my cue. I will have such self-limiting thoughts. It's ridiculous. And then I have to remind myself, God knows me better. He knows me better than I know myself. And so if he thinks I can do this, I ought to try to see if he might be right. And so those relationships are so intimately connected that we have to work on them in tandem, and they're the foundation for everything. The more that we take our take our lead from the Lord, and the more we are centered on him, and the more we trust him, and the more we approve of ourselves because we make choices that we know to be right, the easier it is to have a boundary with someone in a hard relationship, or to say the thing that needs to be said. One of the things you'll really appreciate this, Bryan. Um, so Jordan Peterson, I think, has said many brilliant things, and of course, we know he's studied all of the tyrannical governments like crazy and is into all of that stuff. And he said, I heard him say once that um, he said he studied, Russia and China and all the communist countries and all that kind of stuff. And he got really honest with himself and he said, what kind of person would I have been in that regime? Would I have done the things that those people did? And he said, I think that's a very vital question for us to ask, because in the West, what we tend to do is stand on our high moral ground and think, I would never do that. I would never be that person. But that's a lie. And he said, I kept asking myself the question, how do we stop that from ever happening again? And I decided that the only way to stop that from ever happening again is to be the kind of people who would never do that. And the only way, like Alexander Solzhenitsyn talks about this too, when he talks about the people in the gulags, like, who were the people who didn't give in? Who were the people who didn't become rotten with all the corruption they were surrounded with? The people who had nurtured their character before they got there. The people who had worked on the tiny things. It really does matter if you get out of bed when your alarm goes off. It really does matter if you go on a walk when you feel like you should, or you whatever, go to church or serve someone or say a prayer. It matters that you do those things that your conscience is telling you to do, because then you become more virtuous and the kind of person that can answer a call. One of the things I talk about a lot is, like, if your personal life is a mess, if you're in negative thoughts incessantly, if you have all kinds of self-doubt, if you don't have a lot of internal discipline, if your home is a wreck, if your relationships are messy, God can't use you much. You're limited by your incapacity. So his call for you is going to be, get your house in order. His first call for you is going to be, fix your relationship with me, with yourself, with your family, with your fellow men. And then you can do more and more and more in my name.
And this isn't about, becoming such an icon of self-mastery that, look, I walk above the ground where everybody else is, and I'm so much better than them. In fact, as it pertains to truth seeking, it really, the people I know who are very serious about seeking truth are among the most humble people that I know,
Yes.
simply because they
Yes.
understand that if you're
Yes.
seeking truth, there are going to be times you're going to encounter new truth and have to,
Yes.
you're going to have to bring it into your life and assimilate it into who you are. And that means you have to be willing to say, okay, I didn't know that before.
Yeah. One of the things that reminds me of something that C.S. Lewis taught, because your relationship with God is such a vital component of that experience. And so one of the things that he taught, that I think this is in Mere Christianity. It's so important to understand. He said that the closer we grow to God, the more clear it becomes to us the huge chasm between who we are and who he is. It's only the person that's really distant from God that can have ego enough to think that they're a really good guy. It's actually in drawing close to him and seeing, like, how magnificent he is. Like, one of the most humbling things I do is read about great men and women like the Ten Booms. Every time I'm like, oh, how could I ever, and I'm a much better person than I used to be, but I'm still like, how can Father say that the greatest honor that could come to his family would be to die for a Jewish baby? How can he say that? Could I say that? Could I really say that and mean it? And I just, no, I am just not even anywhere close to the person I'd like to be. But there has to be a certain, if the problems in your home and in your personal life are too messy, your first job is to clean a little bit of that up, because what'll happen, I'll give you an example. So years ago, I was listening to this radio program, and there was this really incredible woman who felt this mission to save children from being aborted. And she had devoted her life to this work. And she had done a myriad of things to make sure that young women like had ultrasounds or were educated properly or whatever the case was. And she had really made a difference. The problem was that that's all she did. And in the meantime, she ignored her husband and her children. So what came out of all of this was that she was completely estranged from her children and her husband was divorcing her because she didn't develop the balance and put her life in order first. Now, that doesn't mean she couldn't have done those in tandem. The tragedy of it is she could have brought her family with her. And that's the thing I say to moms all the time. You feel the call to go, use your musical talent in the community, then your children can sit at your feet while you play your guitar at a rest home. There's a million ways for them to watch you trying to glorify God with your gifts. Just bring them along, make them part of the journey with you, demonstrate it by example.
Audrey, unfortunately, we are coming up fast on the end of our segment here. I want to have you back on this program because what you're saying is resonating with every part of my heart here. Let's talk about where people can access this message. Your website, once again, is
themissiondrivenmom.com.
Okay, and you mentioned that the audiobook is actually available for free, but
Yep.
you know what? There's just nothing like having a real book in your hands
Mhm.
when you can put annotations in and go back and reread over and over again. I
Yeah,
want to
this is
ask
what
you
it looks
this.
like. Richard Paul
Okay,
Evans did the endorsement for me.
the, wow. Hey,
Yeah,
that's a pretty heavy hitter.
yeah, he helped me make the book cover and all that good stuff. He was really impressed with it. So anyway, yeah, this is the book. You can grab it. It's like $17, I think, if you want a hard copy. But yeah, you can get the book for free at the Mission Driven Mom.
Before we wrap things up, though, I
Mm-hmm.
want to ask you to talk a little bit about. There's a lot of anger out there today. In fact, there are some
Yeah.
people who I think their lives are running on pure white hot rage, and they seethe over everything they do. It could be political, it could be frustration over
Yeah.
some social injustice or their financial situation, whatever it is. Talk to me about the peace that comes from being engaged and having a mission to fulfill.
Yeah. I think a lot of that anger is generated from a feeling of impotence. There's a lot of, we've got a big government. We're real top heavy. We're top heavy educationally. We're top heavy everywhere. And you can feel like, the little tiny fish in the big ocean, you can feel like you have no impact. Your voice doesn't matter. You're never going to make a difference. And what happens when you get serious about having control over the one thing that that I love the way that Covey said it. I can exercise control over the one thing I have control over, and that's me. As you work on your relationship with yourself and with God, and you come to see how unique and gifted you are, you will find that there are a myriad of ways you really can use your gifts to make a difference. You would be shocked. Like, I know people who have gifts with interior design. Well, there's a myriad of ways you can bless the poor with a gift in interior design. You can educate them, you can beautify their spaces, and beautiful spaces matter. There are a lot of things that really matter that we don't think of as mission because they're not government or economics or big picture or a famous influencer, but you need to engage in work that matters to you. And you'll find one of the things I talk about in the book is you have a message that burns in your heart. And God will show you that message. And I promise your message dovetails with your gifts. And the Lord will show you the way that you can move forward. And it might be tiny at first, but it doesn't matter. You can alleviate yourself of that anger, that feeling of impotence and incapacity. That's a victim mentality. We are creators. God made us to be creators. And so your job is to go create and partner with him to discover your missions and get busy doing them. And you'll find all of that falls away.
Once again, we're talking with Audrey Rindlisbacher. Her book is called The Mission Driven Life. Her website is themissiondrivenmom.com. I will have links in the show notes, which you will find at thebryanhydeshow.com. And I'm dead serious, Audrey, you've got to come back on here because
Okay.
we've only scratched the surface
Yes.
of a topic that deserves so much more consideration. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
my guest.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.